Hi, and welcome to a special LA-based episode of InstaVision. I'm Glenn Reynolds. Well, it's 2015, the world is changing, and we're going to talk about how. I'm joined today by Joel Kotkin. He's the editor-in-chief of The New Geography, and he's a distinguished presidential fellow in urban futures at Chapman University. His new book, which you should read, I have, is The New Class Conflict. Welcome.
Nice to be here.
So when Barack Obama came in, we heard a lot of attacks on the rich, and the SEIU folks were even busing protesters to executive homes. We had a lot of talk about pitchforks, but now the Obama administration seems to be kind of, I don't know, run by Wall Street. What happened?
Well, first of all, I think they were always run by Wall Street. You know,
it was just a big lie all along?
It was kabuki from day one. I mean, if you take a look at particularly in 2008, he had the vast majority of the support on Wall Street. The New York Times dubbed him the hedge fund candidate. He had very good relations with the big money people in Chicago. So there's always been this kind of, sort of kabuki. He does one thing on the, that sort of is sort of rhetorical, and then what he does in the real world. And look, he's a very good politician, and he's been able to play both ends. The difference between him and a lot of other politicians is his rhetoric led people to think he was something very different than what he was.
Well, that's certainly true. Now, Eric Holder hasn't been prosecuting bankers for financial crimes, which we kind of thought might happen too. Is that just part of the same package? They bought their protection?
Yeah, definitely. And if you take a look at Holder, where he comes from, corporate law, Chicago, that, is part of the whole thing. And, he even made some comments about, well, we can't prosecute them because it would have economic repercussions. And so what have they done? They've gone after some 28-year-old French guy who maybe went sort of out of control. But to me, it's amazing to me that one single major financial person went down from what happened in 2008. Nobody important was prosecuted. And contrast that with what happened under Bush, the first Bush, and under Clinton. Whenever the number of prosecutions has dropped, this should tell us something about what's really going on.
Well, and in fact, now we've got new rules written basically by Citibank lobbyists and embraced by the Obama administration. They're going to let banks make risky investments with depositor money and be backstopped by the feds.
Well, the Treasury Secretary is on loan, so that makes perfectly good sense. Geithner went off and went to some big private equity fund.
Right.
I mean, basically, they're playing this sort of two-part game. But it's also part of the strategy, unfortunately, as a Democrat, of what the Democratic Party has become. It's become the party of the rich and the poor.
Yeah, that of course, is exactly what you say in your book, The New Class Conflict. Is that why the left's giving Obama a pass on this stuff? Because basically that's part of the whole structure?
I think it's part of the structure. Also, I think, frankly, I think President Obama gets a lot of credit, A, being African-American, B, getting a lot of credit because he's an academic and they relate to that.
Academics are naturally pure. We're morally superior. That's true.
Yeah, well, I haven't quite noticed it, but anyway. But I think that basically he epitomizes what the Democratic Party has become. And you can see it in the election results. The white working class, even white millennials now voting Republican. And what you see is his strength is really in the very wealthy, the people with PhDs. He doesn't do well with people with just BAs. He does well with people with PhDs. And then the poor. And one of the reasons that the Democrats, I think, had a lot of problems this year, and I think will be a problem also in 2 years, is African Americans, Hispanics have not done well under this administration. And so even though they're not about to vote Republican, they're not
very enthusiastic.
Right.
Yeah.
Why, for what? I mean, African Americans, in many ways, I've just finished an article on this, African Americans are in worse shape than they've probably been in 30 years.
So in 2016, the current favorite for the Democrats is Hillary. If anything, she's closer to Wall Street, isn't she? Or at least as close.
Oh, I would say more, closer. Remember, she was senator from New York.
Right.
She never had what Bill had, which was that old Southern populist kind of feeling for regular people, because he came from that himself.
Right.
Whereas Hillary, I think, is very much,
She comes from money.
She comes from a well-to-do family, and she's, whether we'll see more of the shot and beer Hillary, I don't know. But as I try to point out in the new class conflict, we can't understand politics anymore in the old way that Republicans were the party of the rich, Democrats are the party of the middle class and the working class. It doesn't work that way anymore.
No, it's almost flipped. Now, Elizabeth Warren has been a big critic of Wall Street, but is this just more kabuki? If she were president, would things be different?
It's hard to say. I would hope that we would have, oh God, you're going to get mad at me. But, didn't we learn that maybe we shouldn't have college professors as presidents?
Law professors.
But then we have Woodrow Wilson, who was a president of a university, and what a disaster he turned out to be. So, there is kind of a problem with her. No, if I was going to take my leftism, I would rather take it from Bernie Sanders because it's the real thing. But I think fundamentally, the Democratic Party also has a big problem. To appeal to working class whites and Hispanics and African Americans, you have to have a growth economy that creates good blue collar jobs. You can't do that and make climate change your #1 issue.
Yeah, I noticed that most of the big money donors are donating to Democrats. We hear a lot about the Koch brothers, but they're actually fairly far down the list of billionaires who give to politicians. So why are the Democrats continuing to talk such a populist game? Why don't they just go ahead and admit what their base is?
Well, because they want to win elections.
No,
I can't imagine a Republican candidate say, hey, I'm running for president as a candidate of the ultra rich. He's not going to do it, even if that may be what he is. The fundamental thing is the middle class, the working class in America have been disempowered by both parties. There are factions on the left of the Democratic Party and even on the right of the Democratic Party that are more populist, and obviously with the Tea Party among the Republicans. Right. But these are few and far between, and the power of the lobbyists, the power of Wall Street and K Street on American politics is probably greater than it's ever been because it's now entrenched in both parties.
Yeah, we've seen this. Wall Street's flourished. People say, well, the economy's doing well because the stock market's up. But for ordinary people, for Main Street, as you say, it hasn't been that great at all. And the recovery seems to have been mostly a phenomenon of the financial sector. Republicans don't seem to be taking proper advantage of this either. Are we likely to see a third party? Is that a possible outcome from the sort of stuff you're talking about? Or?
It should be. But, as we were discussing before we started, there are many legal barriers, make it very, very difficult. You would have to have a charismatic and probably self-funding candidate. And that's hard to find. The closest we've seen in recent history is Ross Perot. I don't know about charismatic being the way I would describe it, but he did have a kind of a shtick, and he had a appeal. And look, the guy got a lot of votes. He got about 20-something%.
He was actually leading in the polls at one point. So yeah, it's possible that somebody who brought more to the table could do better. But I have to say, if you ask me, I don't know who that would be.
No, the only one right now that comes to mind is Jim Webb as conceivably as a candidate. But I think we're more likely to see fracturing of, left-wing Democrats nominating a left-wing break-off candidate, and maybe if a mainstream Republican wins, there may be a more traditional conservative candidate coming out. The two-party system clearly isn't working, and we're going to have to look at some other options down the road because, what we get now is absolutely horrific.
Well, the one good piece of news, if I could call it that, is that most people seem to agree that what we're getting now is absolutely horrific. So maybe that's going to open things up for some kind of change down the line. But thanks for taking the chance to talk with us now.
It was my pleasure.
Joel Kotkin is the editor-in-chief of The New Geography. He's a distinguished presidential fellow in urban futures at Chapman University. And his new book, which I recommend highly, is The New Class Conflict. Check it out. And that's all for today's InstaVision. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back soon. In the meantime, have fun on the internet. Thanks.